So I'm going to, first of all, just go very quickly through the 5 campaigns that we're doing as part of the faith sector pilot with Fairfax County. I want to emphasize that we're doing these campaigns with everybody. So if you're from, like I live in Loudoun County, we will really welcome working with faith communities really anywhere, but we're mostly in Northern Virginia and then going on to the Northern Shenandoah Valley. But this is going to be Fairfax County centric just because it's this piece of work we're doing. But again, happy to do all of these with everyone. After this, we're going to do a deep dive into the climate Creation Care Kitchens campaign, and our wonderful longtime facts activist, John Cluett, is going to be giving that. And then we'll have a discussion afterwards. We do have an hour for this meeting, but I want to just say every meeting we've had has gone long. So we're happy to stay on 15, 20, 25 minutes afterwards if the discussion is vibrant and you have time. So, but I'm going to do a very quick overview of the other campaigns today. I'm happy to give this presentation to anybody who would be interested, community groups, faith communities. And we can do deeper dives into the different campaigns if you're interested. Okay. So first of all, I just want to say we're really grateful to our wonderful sponsors, Mom's Organic Market and Sandbox Financial Partners. And we are working with Fairfax County in partnership to implement the county's community-wide energy and climate action plan. And the reason Fairfax is doing these pilot sectors is because this is a community-wide plan. When you just look at what the county's operations encompass, it's only 3 to 5% of the greenhouse gas emissions. So if we're going to really hit the community-wide goals, they've got to get, churches and synagogues and Islamic centers and businesses and homes, and everybody is going to have to lean in to make this happen. So this is really important work that we're doing together, and we're really excited that you're here this morning to get going with it. The plan is available online, and I'm happy to share these slides with anybody, and this is a link to the plan. Okay. So the county calls this project Climate Champions, and this is a slide from one of their presentations to the Board of Supervisors. And as you can see, we're leading the effort, but this is really all about the faith communities doing the work. And this is also part of the Resilient Fairfax plan. As it gets hotter, more humid, and stormier around here, things are going to get rougher for residents and businesses. And so this plan is all about building the resilience of the community. And quite a few of the things we're doing fit into that resilience work, including this first campaign, which we call Solar Sanctuaries. If you can put solar and a battery backup system on a faith building, when the lights go out, you can actually pull off the grid and become like a little power island. It's called a microgrid, and keep the air conditioning going, keep the refrigeration going, have electricity for all the different things we need in life, and people can come to the faith community, faith building as a place of refuge. So that's the idea of a solar sanctuary. But we're doing it in 3 phases. Phase 1 is energy efficiency measures, because the best energy is energy not used. And also you need less solar panels and a smaller battery if you're using less energy. So that's the number one thing, insulation, maybe switching to a heat pump instead of a gas-fired HVAC system, things like that. And this is all about taking care of especially the most vulnerable people in our community. When it gets hot and humid, those who can't regulate temperature in their bodies as well, like the elderly, little babies, pregnant women, people who have medical conditions, it's really important for them to have this refuge. And by the way, each of these campaigns, we're targeting different groups of people within the faith communities. There's people who are interested in the buildings, people who are interested in the grounds, etc. Okay, and this campaign primarily addresses two of the strategies from CCAP, which is, again, the Community Energy and Climate Action Plan, increasing energy efficiency and conservation in existing buildings, and then increasing renewable energy. The second one, this is what we're doing a deep dive in today, is Creation Care Kitchens. This is all about everything that's connected with the kitchens in our faith community. So it's, all about food and the dishes and the stoves and all of that. So I'm going to go real quick over that because you're going to hear a lot about it today. Addresses these strategies, increasing energy efficiency and conservation in buildings, and then electrifying buildings, as well as reducing waste. Third campaign is Tree of Life. This is all about the grounds of a faith community. So increasing the number of native plants, maybe doing some community gardens and, having food raised closer to home. A lot of churches or faith communities are doing this and giving it to food pantries. Getting rid of invasive species, maybe having a little less lawn and taking better care by letting the grass grow longer, things like that, and composting, which leads to, and then this, these are the strategies that Fairfax County's plan that this addresses. Okay, the Transit Corps is the fourth one. And that's all about how do we get around and, can you get to the church without taking your car? I'll give you one example from my church. I used to go to a church that's a 10-minute walk from my house, but they always had the door locked that faced towards the sidewalk. And I had to add another 5 minutes to my walk to walk around the whole church over to the side that's by the parking lot. So there's all kinds of things we need to think about in this, from electrifying our buses to providing safer ways to get to transit stops, so walking and biking. And this is a huge equity issue because not everybody in our community can afford to have a car, has multiple parking spaces where they live, and they need to take transit or walk or bike. And these are the strategies in CCAP that it would that this campaign addresses. And this, by the way, is the topic for next month's monthly meeting. And I'm very excited to say that Deputy County Administrator Rachel Flynn is going to be joining us for that. The county is doing some really great work around this. And then final campaign is Clean Cars. Most of us do drive in this sprawling area. And so we need to transition our cars from fossil fuel powered to electric. And also electric bicycles are becoming more and more popular. So this is going to be the topic in June in our monthly meeting. I really hope you can come to that because faith communities can play a really important role here. And one strategy here, increasing electric vehicle adoption. Okay, so these are the monthly meetings. Today we're talking about Creation Care Kitchens. Next month we'll be talking about the Transit Corps. After that, the Clean Cars. And then in July, we're going to look back at all 5 campaigns and see how we're doing, how many faith communities are leaning into it, and if they're, what they're doing. And then finally, this is where you can find out more about what we're doing. And now I'm going to stop sharing and quickly give this over to John. John, take it away.
Okay, I guess I better unmute to start with, and I will share my screen. Let me see if I'm sharing. That looks like the right part of the screen here. Can everybody see that? It should say Faith Alliance for Climate Solutions.
Yes.
Okay, good. All right. Well, thank you, Andrea, and hello, everybody, and thank you for being here. So if we're going to talk about Creation Care Kitchens, the first question that you might well ask is, what would that include? What would that focus on? And I would suggest that it should include everything concerning the food that we eat or serve. So, for example, this would include the food we decide to eat or to serve other people, how that food comes to us from farm to fork, how we prepare and serve that food, how much of it ends up being wasted, and what happens to the wasted food. Now, you might also ask, why does any of this matter? And the reason is that what we eat and the food that we waste has a huge effect on some of the most urgent crises facing humanity, including the climate crisis, the water crisis, which is bad and getting worse, and the related crisis of biodiversity loss. These are big, big issues. So the next question you might ask is, what can we do about any of this? Well, just in the context of food and kitchens, some examples would be to waste less food and to compost what doesn't get eaten, and to move toward a more planet-friendly diet in terms of what you eat and what you serve. Go all electric in the kitchen and beyond. Serve food with things that can be washed instead of thrown away. And very importantly, build awareness of the importance of these issues by talking about them and advocating for practical solutions. So I'd like to start out by talking about the food that we choose to eat and the larger effects of those decisions. Now, usually when food and climate are discussed, we focus on how climate affects the food supply through drought, wildfires, flooding, crop failure, and so on. But we also need to focus on the effect that our food choices and the resulting agricultural system have on the climate crisis and the other problems I mentioned. So to begin with, the soil stores about 3 times as much carbon dioxide as the atmosphere does. Agriculture has lots of effects, but 3 in particular are these. Tilling and plowing release CO2 into the atmosphere by disturbing the soil. And clearing more land for agriculture through deforestation makes things even worse by converting a carbon sink into a carbon emitter. Fertilizing crops releases another greenhouse gas, nitrous oxide, into the atmosphere. And beef and dairy cattle release huge amounts of methane from the enteric fermentation in their digestive systems. So if we look at the atmosphere over the last 1,000 years, you can see how CO2 from all sources has increased, especially since the mid-1850s. Nitrous oxide levels show a similar pattern, as do methane levels. So let's look at the relative warming effect of various greenhouse gases in the atmosphere. There's CO2 from fossil fuels and deforestation, methane from agriculture, landfills, and pipeline leaks, nitrous oxide from fertilizer and manure, and fluorine gases like in air conditioners. This pie chart, using data from the UN Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, shows relative warming effects over 10 years. You can see that methane is almost as big a part of the pie as carbon dioxide from fossil fuels. This is why methane was a major focus before and during the COP26 climate conference in Glasgow in November 2021. The large short-term effect of methane is particularly relevant to animal agriculture because of the enormous amount of methane and other greenhouse gases that are produced by animal agriculture. If cattle were their own country, they would be the second biggest emitter after China. Looking at all of the agricultural land in the world, more than 3/4 of it is used for grazing livestock and growing their feed. And yet all this land produces only 18% of the calories that humans eat. By contrast, only 23% of agricultural land is for crops we eat, but it produces 82% of our calories. So if we ate a more plant-based diet, we could produce 100% of our needed calories on much less land than we're using now, and the remainder could be used for reforestation or rewilding to be a carbon sink and to help slow biodiversity loss. And some, of course, could be used to grow even more food because world hunger remains an enormous issue. The UN Food and Agriculture Organization's report on livestock's long shadow noted that humanity's biggest use of land is for livestock, which degrades the land, is a key driver of deforestation, increases water use, and is probably the biggest source of water pollution. The Paris Agreement set a stretch goal of limiting temperature increase to 1.5 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times. But on our current trajectory, agriculture alone could push us past the limit, no matter what else we do, unless we change our diet, according to the World Resources Institute. Of course, methane isn't the only problem here. Animal agriculture is also a huge user of scarce freshwater resources. Worldwide, cattle use almost 9 times as much fresh water and 6.5 times as much food as the entire human population. Here's a comparison of the water usage for various food crops. Per pound, beef, pork, or chicken require much more water than potatoes, tomatoes, or apples. And fresh water is not an unlimited resource. In 2009, the world's largest food company told US officials that meat eating is driving water depletion worldwide, with underground aquifers drying up. It said a third of the world's population may face water scarcity issues by 2025 that could become catastrophic by 2050. And from all that food and all that fresh water, livestock produce huge amounts of toxic waste, especially in concentrated animal feeding operations, or CAFOs, like this chicken operation. Manure lagoons are another big source of methane emissions, and their contents can leak into streams and rivers on down toward the Gulf of Mexico. Farm runoff of fertilizer and waste products produces a dead zone in the Gulf of Mexico, thousands of square miles in size. Fertilizer and manure runoff cause a huge algae bloom that ends up using up all the oxygen in the water, so no fish can survive. There's not enough time to cover all of the harmful effects of animal agriculture, like antibiotic resistance, zoonotic diseases and pandemics, wasteful corporate subsidies, and cruelty to animals. But the key question remains, what can we do about all this? In Project Drawdown, experts from around the world analyzed the benefits of various solutions to global warming, both to lower greenhouse gas emissions and to draw down the carbon that's already in the atmosphere. In their 2017 book, of the 5 most effective solutions, 3 involve the food system and its collateral effects: reduced food waste, a plant-rich diet, and tropical forests. Their website shows the currently projected impact of various solutions. One scenario is based on keeping temperature within 2 degrees Celsius above pre-industrial times, and another scenario within 1.5 degrees. In both cases, plant-rich diets and reducing food waste are among the top 4 solutions. So first, let's consider food waste. Globally, although 800 million people go to bed hungry, as much as 40% of all the food we produce is either lost or wasted. Food loss from pests or spoilage is more common in low-income countries, and food waste, discarding edible food, is more common in high-income countries. Uneaten food wastes resources. 14% of all fresh water use and 18% of cropland, along with wasted energy, money, and labor. If one big farm grew all the uneaten food in the US, it would be the size of California and New York put together. And 90% of uneaten food in the US goes to landfills, and is about a quarter of everything in the landfill. Through anaerobic digestion, decomposition in the absence of oxygen, organic waste in landfills emits methane and carbon dioxide in about equal amounts, more greenhouse gases than the whole US airline industry. But if you compost your food waste, it decomposes in the presence of oxygen and emits some carbon dioxide, but very little methane, which is a much better solution because methane is, over a 10-year period, about 100 times as effective as CO2 in raising the temperature. Now, I might note, and I'm taking a short tangent here, because just in the mail today, information arrived about Fairfax County's food scrap composting pilot program that they kicked off a few years ago. And they're now announcing 4 companies that will collect food scraps from people and turn them into compost. These include the Compost Crew, Future Acres Urban Farming, Natural Upcycling, and Veteran Compost. And so that's even if you don't have room in your own home or yard to do any composting, you can have these people pick it up and turn it into something useful. So food loss and waste occur throughout the supply chain. Low market prices can make it uneconomical to harvest an entire crop. Manufacturing may waste edible food trimmings. Retailers may misjudge demand and overbuy. But the biggest food waste is at home, when we buy too much, store it badly, cook and serve too much, and forget the leftovers in the back of the fridge. And food waste is not a small problem. I recently ran across a Bloomberg chart of some of the biggest sources of global warming pollution. Here's how the national oil companies of Russia, Iran, Abu Dhabi, and Saudi Arabia, ExxonMobil, and some other sources compare to US food waste. It produces about a third as much global warming pollution as does ExxonMobil. If you have sharp eyes, you may have seen that several of the last few slides used information from an organization called ReFed. They have a wonderful website with a ton of information about their plans to help cut food loss and waste in half by 2030. And to reduce the climate impact of what we do eat, a great approach is to move toward a plant-rich diet. By eliminating or reducing meat and dairy products, we reduce the incentive to clear-cut more tropical forests to graze cattle and grow their feed, which in turn reduces the overuse of water resources and the pressure on biological diversity. And this is an effective approach. An Atlantic article a few years ago noted that if everyone ate beans instead of beef, that change alone could almost have enabled the US to meet the 2020 emission goals that President Obama had set in 2009. Let's also look at a study of various interventions on a 100-person event where food was served. The most effective was switching from beef to vegetables for the food. Serving smaller portions of beef was a distant second. Using recycled plastic or eliminating single-use plastic is very important environmentally, but the direct reduction of greenhouse gas emissions was small. So how can we promote a more plant-based diet when we have events that serve food? Well, one way is to focus on cuisines that lend themselves to whole food plant-based eating, like Italian, Mexican, Indian, Chinese, and Thai. They don't need meat or dairy to be delicious. And people often tend to go along with the default choice, as the book Nudge talks about. A default choice is what you get if you don't actively choose something else. For example, studies have shown that if the default choice is meat, most people eat that. And if the default is vegetarian, most people eat that. There's also a consulting group called Greener by Default that will work for free with any organization or institution that serves food, like a church, synagogue, mosque, or temple, a school, a conference, or a community group, to help them serve sustainable plant-based food by default. Some of their strategies are to make plant-based the default unless someone asks for meat or dairy, to put meat and dairy at the end of the buffet, to have at least twice as many plant-based options as meat or dairy options, and to serve plant-based condiments, milks, dessert, and bread. Most people won't even notice. The free services offered by Greener by Default include one-on-one consultation and help with menus, recipes, sourcing, marketing, and education. And they're also associated with the Better Food Foundation, which also seeks to accelerate the shift to plant-centered diets through outreach, research, and capacity building through grants to faith groups and others. The foundation notes the role that religious communities play in shaping dietary norms, and they provide resources like food policy toolkits, speakers, and educational events. Faith-based organizations that they support reach out to Christian, Jewish, and Unitarian Universalist congregations and their members. Now let's move on to talk about how food is cooked. For years, the preferred cooking method for a lot of people, both at home and in professional commercial kitchens, has been gas. It turns on and off quickly, it can heat the sides of a pan, and the burner cools down quickly when you turn it off. A lot of churches and other institutions have gas stoves in their kitchens. More recently, however, there has been troubling research about gas stoves. Studies have concluded that indoor air is often more polluted than outdoor air, that gas stoves can be a large source of toxic pollutants indoors, and that indoor pollution from gas stoves can reach levels that would actually be illegal outdoors. Another study found that more than 98% of the gas stoves tested leaked methane when they were off and produced harmful indoor air pollution like oxides of nitrogen when they were on, not only harming the climate, but also degrading indoor air quality. And when the natural gas supplied to homes was tested, researchers found that it contained not just the main ingredient of methane, but some 21 other hazardous air pollutants as defined by the EPA. In a Consumer Reports study, all of the gas stoves they tested produced potentially worrisome levels of nitrogen oxides, which they noted are linked to the development or worsening of asthma, lung infections, and other respiratory issues, especially in children and the elderly. And another study concluded that almost 13% of childhood asthma in the US is attributable to gas stove use. So there are a lot of reasons to switch to electric cooking. And there's currently a particular exciting option in that department, namely induction ranges and cooktops, which use magnetism to heat your pots and pans, but not the surface of the stove itself. They heat faster, they're safer, they save energy, and they don't add to indoor air pollution. Consumer Reports has said induction ranges are so good you may not miss your gas stove at all. Among their observations, there's already been an accelerating trend toward electric and induction ranges because of people's growing concerns about the climate and the falling prices of induction ranges. And this is a trend that all of the issues about the health of gas stoves may further accelerate. Induction ranges actually outperformed gas in some ways. They did better on high heat cooking, and they heat and cool faster. And with the recent passage of the Inflation Reduction Act, there are rebates available for switching to new electric or induction ranges and cooktops, as well as for any new wiring that needs to be installed. So it's a great time to make the switch. People who switch to induction seem to quickly become convinced of its benefits. And as this New York Times article notes, a number of restaurants are making the switch, such as this one in Manhattan. Among the benefits are lower utility costs, more precise control, and a cooler working environment, especially in the summer. And if you watch cooking shows, you may have noticed that the Great British Baking Show uses induction cooktops. So if you or your church, synagogue, mosque, or temple want to reduce indoor air pollution, help fight climate change, and save on utility bills, you should strongly consider switching to electric cooking, such as induction. FACTS will be investigating the details of how to obtain these various rebates as regulations are finalized. So if you're interested in these rebates or in helping with the necessary research, please let us know. There are also other rebates available that relate to kitchens, like heating and air conditioning systems, where moving away from gas to something like heat pump systems can help the planet and also save a lot of money. So even if everyone makes their best efforts to choose planet-friendly food and cook it in a way that doesn't add to greenhouse gas emissions, there may still be food left over that will go to waste. So another strategy and an opportunity for individuals and congregations is food rescue. There are national organizations like Food Rescue US that have a web-based app that guides volunteers to pick up surplus food from local businesses and deliver it to social service agencies that serve the food insecure. They have affiliates in many states, including Maryland, the District, and Virginia, although the only area so far in Virginia is in Virginia Beach. So if you or your congregation might want to explore setting up a food rescue chapter in Northern Virginia, that could be a wonderful ministry. Of course, this is not the only way to help rescue food. For example, Our Savior's Way Lutheran Church in Ashburn, Virginia, started a food rescue ministry a number of years ago under the leadership of Pastor Ralph Weekman that 2 or 3 times a week rescues surplus food from Panera and other restaurants that would otherwise go to waste. There are, of course, many ways congregations can be involved in food-related issues. The Unitarian Universalist congregation of Fairfax has been particularly active. Their climate action group, now known as Act for Climate Today, has sponsored a number of presentations that are accompanied by a plant-based meal, like this talk by a medical doctor on nutrition and climate change, or this concert last year where these virtuoso musicians not only performed together, but also spoke about the connection between food and the health of the planet. Act for Climate Today has also sponsored a number of virtual events like this presentation on food as medicine for us and the planet, or this presentation on efforts to secure humane treatment of farmed animals. At St. John Newman Catholic Church in Reston, Virginia, there is a Care for Our Common Home ministry, inspired by Pope Francis's encyclical Laudato Si on care for our common home. One of the things the Pope discusses in Laudato Si is our throwaway culture, and some of the parishioners focused on how much plastic is thrown away, which harms marine animals and birds and leaches petrochemicals into soil and water. And so they started a dishwashing ministry. They noticed that lots of paper and plastic was being used, but the parish also had lots of regular plates and silverware and a commercial dishwasher. So the dishwashing ministry offered to help out when events were held, and it was a big hit. More people got involved and had fun getting to know one another as they saved resources and lessened harmful pollution. And of course, we can all take steps to broaden our own knowledge of issues like the ones we talked about today, which will help inform our own actions and also make us better able to talk to our friends and family about these really important matters. One excellent resource is waterbear.com, which has lots of free films on food and climate and related issues. WaterBear has been called the Netflix for our planet. They have a very large collection of free films like these. I'm really looking forward to looking at Greenwash Explained with Hamsters. I also highly recommend watching the movie Eating Our Way to Extinction, narrated by Academy Award winner Kate Winslet, which is available online for free. About an hour and 20 minutes long, it stresses the planetary effects of what we eat and the threat the animal agriculture system poses to our collective future. In fact, we're going to be having an informal discussion of this movie on Thursday, May 11 at 7:30. So if you're interested, you have about 4 weeks to watch the movie on your own and then join us on Zoom to talk about it. We'd love to know what you think, and we'd love to have a bunch of you come to see that. So to conclude, we live in a time that in many ways is quite dark. But what we've talked about, rescuing food, hosting educational events, eating less meat and dairy, composting, starting a dishwashing ministry, even watching a movie, are candles to help drive the dark away. It's been said that hope is the result of action rather than the other way around. So to bring greater hope to the world, let's each find our own way to light a candle or many candles to help light the way to a better world. Thank you so much for your time and attention this morning, and I'll be happy to attempt to answer any questions that you might have. And with that, I will stop sharing my screen.
Well, I want to just jump in and say, John, that was such a fascinating presentation. I learned so much from you, and I just marvel at the talent and knowledge base that we have in this network of ours. So thank you for that.